Okay, we're with number 9 now. And the last time we ended up talking about threshold margins. And then I think we developed the dividend growth model, infinite growth model. Mainly did that. I don't know how useful it all is, but you sure see it in a lot of the textbooks, so I thought it'd probably be a good idea to cover that one. So anyway, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about value creation. We've mentioned it before. And let me start off with an example. Let's say you buy a stock at 100. And then a year later, you sell for 102. My question is, are you happy? You might be. Hey, you got a $2 gain. So you can certainly write that one down and say, yeah, well, my gain is $2. But what if I told you that inflation was expected to be 3%? Now I know that where we are right now in July of 2009, I think we're still in probably a bit of deflation, but normal times inflation's been about 3%. Well, then we would expect this 100 to grow to 103, and as a result, I don't think you'd be too happy. So you didn't even cover inflation. So in a real sense, so you had really, instead of a gain, sort of, I guess we could call it an accounting gain or a nominal gain, we could call the real gain was negative, was be -1. Okay, let me give you another example. Let's say you buy at 100 and you sell at 20. I'm sorry, 120. If you sell at 20, that sounds like we did this a year ago. So now what do you think? Let's say here clearly we have a gain of 20. But what if I told you that the price level actually went up 5%? So we expected maybe 3% inflation, but the overall price level went up 5%. So in that sense, you'd say, well, this 100 should have gone to 1.5, but it went to 120. So in this case, we'd say the gain is 15. So we could sort of say that maybe is a price level adjusted gain. Now let me give you another one. Let's say instead of this, same deal as we had here, but let's say the expectation was that there'd be a 12% gain. Another way to say that would be that the cost of capital for this stock was 12%. In that case, we'd expect the 100 to go to 112. Boy, that one's not being drawn very well. And therefore, we would look at the gain, this sense, of only 8. So we could call that an adjusted gain. There's a term you'll see called economic value added, and that's what EVA would be. The way you do EVA is you take whatever your value is at the start and you multiply it by 1 plus the cost of capital, and then if you beat that, then the amount you beat it by is EVA. So economic value added. That's another way to look at it. Now, my whole point on doing this is that there's a lot of ways to look at gains, and you also always have to look at opportunity costs. Now, you could have done other things. You could have invested in a case of wine. You could have bought another stock. You could do all sorts of things. I mean, you can always do that. and you know that's sort of the buyer's remorse. You bought this and it only went up to 120, and gee, if you'd bought a stock that you know the guy that mows your lawn did, and he said his went up 100 and 150, or he went to Las Vegas and doubled his earnings, you know, that sort of thing, then you'd have a remorse. But you have to look at your opportunity cost. But also, there's a big difference between expectations and realizations. Now, if you want to get fancy, the way to talk about this, you'll see these things in the literature, and you'll see ex ante, and you'll see ex post here. And all this means is before, and this one means after. And one of the ways I like to think about it is before, there's risk, because lots of things can happen. A lot more things can happen than actually happen. And this is after, and the risk in a sense is gone. So if you're deciding that you're going to give a lecture at a university or something like that, throw in a few ex antes and ex posts, and they'll think you're a real star. Okay, well, back to the value creation. I think you got a sense for it. But the way I like to look at it is value is equal to wealth. That's what you've got, and you expect it to grow over time. Might not, but that's what you expect. And that expected rate is called the cost of capital. You can call it other things, but when we talk about the cost of capital, that's it. Now, some examples. If you look at long-term governments, right now they're 3%, somewhere like that. Normally they're in the 6 to 7% range. And if you look at the S&P 500, the expectation there, historically, if you go back, goes back to like 1928, you can get, including inflation, about 11%. Right now, hard to know. It's probably close to zero. But if you're a venture capitalist person, you are looking typically at 50% return. But now that doesn't last a long, long time. Typically, you're in for a few years and you get back out. Anyway, that's what the wealth is. And what I want to make a comment is that value creation, you'll see us a lot, is the wealth increase over and above expected. So if you only pick up the cost of capital, then VC 0. If only you get the cost of capital. So when we talk about value creation, we're saying we can beat the cost of capital. But that's why you hire management. If you own an asset, or you're a stockholder, the idea of management is to do value creation greater than 0. These are the so-called net present value greater than 0 projects. Okay, we're getting close to running out of time, but I just want to leave you with this, that if you're thinking about creating value, it's the wealth of whatever you have, and you've got to beat the cost of capital. If you don't beat the cost of capital, then you're not creating any value, even though, like in the examples we had up in here, you had positive dollars created. Okay, well, we'll continue on this in the next lecture.